How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Gimel Daf 13 of Masechta Gittin. Friends. Okay. Today we got a bunch to do. More like Gittin stuff. It's like kind of interesting if you're interested in it, and and we're going to go on to Daf Yud Daled. We're going to go kind of about 2/3 into Yud Daled Amud Aleph is my plan, because then tomorrow we're going to try and finish the first parak. I don't know, I feel like these dafs have been like stopping in funny places, but whatever, we're going to push forward, I think. So, friends, we're going to start on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. Omer tnu get zel ishti shtar shichur zel avdi vames lo yitnu lachar misa tnu mana leish ploni vames yitnu leachar misa. And this be'etzem is going to be a discussion of our daf today. So again, ha'omer tnu get zel ishti. If a fellow says, give this divorce document to my wife, shtar shichur zel avdi, or this freedom document to my eved, vames, and then the fellow, lo yitnu la'achar misa. So they don't give the get or the get isha or the get shichur after the fellow goes to wellwood. Fine. Tnumane leish ploni vames yitnu la'achar misa. But if the fellow had instructed to give money to a certain person, so then you do give the money after he is dead. Okay. Now, it says the Gemara, Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta mishmei de Rav. So it says Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta in the name of Rav, V'hu shetzvurin umunachin b'keren zovis. Okay. It says Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta in the name of Rav that when the Mishnah says at the end of the Mishnah, Tnumana leish ploni vames yitnu lachar misa, that if a fellow instructs, give money to so-and-so, and then the fellow dies, so we do give the money to so-and-so. So even after the instructor is dead, we still go ahead with his wishes and give the money to so-and-so. So says Rav, that is if the money is in a pile in a corner, meaning it's in a specific place. It's like, for example, if for example, if you loan somebody money and then that money is being spent someplace and it's not actually there, or forget about loaning money, right? If you have money in a bank account or something, we're not talking about that. We're talking about where there's specific money in a corner and that money is being given. Okay, fine. But my eskina, now what exactly is the context in which Rav is saying that this money would have to be lying in the corner someplace and not in like a bank account or some other place? So if we're talking about a healthy person, not somebody on their deathbed, not somebody that we're assuming is going to die anytime soon, a healthy fellow. So if we're talking about a healthy fellow, then who cares if the money is in a pile in the corner? Halo mashach. As long as the person who is meant to receive the money has not taken it, it's not his, right? So if a healthy person says that that this money in the corner over there should be given to Shmerel, and then this healthy fellow dies, if Shmerel didn't take the money while the fellow was alive, so it's not his. Why? It shouldn't go to Shmerel. Okay, so maybe it's not talking about a healthy person. Maybe it's talking about a fellow who's severely ill. So my area tzvurin ki ein tzvurin nami. But if we're talking about somebody on their deathbed, somebody who's severely ill, a shchivmira, well then it shouldn't matter whether the money is in a pile in the corner or not, Because after all we hold that the instructions of a shchivmira, of a fellow on his deathbed, the instructions of a shchivmira, it's as if they're written and handed over, right? It's a done deal. And it should not matter regardless of if the money is in a pile in a corner or if the money is some other place in a bank account or something. It shouldn't matter. So the Gemara says, what exactly is this context where Rav says that the money would have to be in a pile in the corner? If it's a bari, well then even if it's in a pile in the corner, it doesn't matter. As long as the recipient hasn't taken it yet, it's not the recipient's, and therefore when the bari dies, the recipient, right, the heirs don't need to give it to the recipient. And if we're talking about a shchivmira, well then even if it's not in a pile in the corner, it's some other place, still whatever shchivmira says is a done deal, and the recipient should get it regardless of if it's in a pile in the corner or not. So we have two answers. Omer Rav Zvid Olam Bibari. So Rav Zvid's answer is that we're talking about a healthy person. Okay, well if that's the case, then why does the recipient receive it? If we're talking about a healthy person, after all, the recipient didn't take it. By the way, I'm recording Babylon Talmud today in the morning. What time is it? It's 6:30 in the morning. So I'm a little bit groggy. My brain is still not entirely turned on, although I have already had 2 cups of coffee. But it's a very busy day today, so I have to record early in the morning. So sorry if my brain is a little fuzzy. A little bit of a fuzzy daf today. Okay, so it says Rav Zvid that it's talking about a bari. Okay, so if we're talking about a bari, so then I don't care that the money's in a pile in the corner. If the recipient didn't take it while the bari was alive, so then it's not his. Rav Huna Amar Rav Monoli biyodcha taneu lo lifloni b'maimod shloshtan kona. Oh, so this is talking about a situation where you have this guy. Let's use Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, okay? So you have Shimon says to Reuven, he says, hey Reuven, I've got some money in your house, right? I left some money in your house. Give it to Levi. Right? Shimon says to Reuven, Shimon, I got some money at your house. Give it to Levi. And all 3 parties are there. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, they're all there. Right? So again, Monali biyodcha, if Shimon says to Reuven, I have money at your house, Taneu lo lefloni, give it to Levi, b'maimed shloshton, and all 3 of them are there, kana, it's a kinyan. And says Rav Zvid, that's punkt what the Mishnah is talking about. It's talking about a matziv, it's talking about a situation where a bari, a healthy person, Shimon's a healthy person, he says to Reuven, this money that I have in your house, give it to Levi, and then Reuven dies, that money still needs to go to Levi, and davka if it's tzvurin, tzvurin umunachin b'keren zavas. But as we're going to see later, this would, Rav Zvid assumes that this only applies to a deposit, not to a loan, right? So we're saying only if it's in a pile in the corner, right? Meaning as opposed to a loan, right? We have, there's a concept of milva lo tza nitna, right? That if I lend you money, I lend you money so you could spend it, right? If I lend you $1,000 and I say pay me back in a year, so if I come back to you in half a year, I don't expect that the money's still going to be, that you're still going to have it. I assume that you spent it, and at a certain point you'll get the money back and you'll pay me back. But I don't assume that the same money that I gave you is the money that you're going to give me back, right? I give you money, you spend it, you get back, you work, you get you earn $1,000, and you'll pay me back that other $1,000 that you earn. As opposed to a pikadon, to guard. If I say, look, here's $1,000, I got to run out someplace, I don't want to go out with $1,000, I'm just going to leave it in your house, I'll come back another time to pick it up. So, in that case, that's a pikadon, that's right, he's guarding it, and the person can't spend that, and And the assumption is I will come back and collect the money that I left there. So Rav Zvid assumes that by a pikadon, by something that, right, a deposit as opposed to a loan, by a deposit. So this concept of Shimon saying to Reuven, give it to Levi, is specifically by a deposit, and that's why we're saying it needs to be tzvurun u'munachim b'keren zavis, that specifically if it's in a pile in the corner. And that's how Rav Zvid understands our Mishnah, that Shimon, who's healthy, is saying to Reuven, hey Reuven, that money that I have in a pile in the corner in your house, give it to Levi, and all three parties are there, therefore it's a kinyan, and even if Shimon dies, the money still goes to Levi. Rav Papa Omar says, Rav Papa, L'olam b'shchiv mira. Rav Papa says, no, we're not talking about a healthy person, we're talking about a severely sick person. Shchiv mira. Well, if it's talking about a shchiv mira, so then shouldn't the money, go to the recipient regardless of if it's in a pile in the corner or not? Well, not so fast. It's like another statement of Rav, which is shchiv mira she'omar tnumana lifloni minachosai, that if a shchiv mira says give money to so and so from my property, mana zeh nosnin, mana stam ein nosnin. Only if the shchiv mira says this specific money, right, this $100 that I have in this particular account, give to so and so, but not if he says just stam money. Chashin shemamana cover ka'amar. Right, so because we're concerned that, well, if he doesn't say specifically which money to give, then maybe he's referring to some money that's buried someplace that you don't know about it. Maybe he's referring to that money, right? So we don't know which money you should be giving him. But if he says he tells you specifically which money to give, so then you give that particular money, and therefore that's why the Mishnah is saying that specifically if it's tzvurun u'munachim b'keren zafis, if it's in a pile in the corner, i.e., this particular, right, if the shchiv mira is saying this particular money I want you to give to the recipient, so then they give the money. But if it wasn't tzvurun u'munachim b'keren zavis, if it wasn't specific money, so then it wouldn't have to be given to the recipient. But the halacha is that we're not concerned that unless he tells you exactly which money, we're not concerned that maybe he's referring to some money that's buried someplace that you don't know about. We don't assume that, and therefore even if he doesn't specify which money exactly, still the command, right, the instructions would be executed, and you would give the money. Okay, so that's the machlokus between Rav Zvid and Rav Papa. That Rav Zvid says that our Mishnah is talking about a bari, and it's talking about Maimon Shloshton, right? That it's talking about where Shimon says to Reuven, give this deposit to Levi. And Rav Papa says it's talking about a shchiv mira, and he's specifically piled up in the corner because he holds that a shchiv mira has to specify specifically which money he's talking about. Rav Papa, my time, how come Rav Papa, who says that the Mishnah is talking about a shchiv mira, how come he doesn't hold like Rav Zvid, who says that it's talking about a bari? Because Rav Papa Rav loshna b'milveh v'loshna b'pikadon, because Rav Papa holds that according to Rav, this concept of Shimon saying to Reuven, give the deposit to Levi, Rav Papa holds that that's not just by a deposit, it's even by a loan. It's even by a loan. And a loan is not, when I loan you money, you're not just keeping it in the corner, and you're not going to say you can give it back to me later, you're going to spend it. And therefore the description of in a pile in the corner would not apply to a loan. And therefore, since Rav's statement of the Maimon Shloshton of Shimon saying to Reuven, give this money to Levi, could even be by a loan, so then it wouldn't make sense to explain our Mishnah to be talking about Shimon, Levi, and Reuven, if our Mishnah is saying that it's specifically a deposit, specifically if it's in a pile in the corner, so that wouldn't make sense, because Rav would say it can even apply to a loan. That's how Rav Papa understands Rav. Rav Zvid, my time lo Omar Rav Papa, and how come Rav Zvid, who says that it's talking about a shchiv mira, how come he doesn't hold like Rav Papa, who says that it's, wait, what? Rav Rav Zvid, my time what? Rav Zvid, who says that it's talking about a bari, how come he doesn't hold like Rav Pape, who says that it's talking about a shchiv mira? So Rav Zvid, my time lo omar ki Rav Pape, lo misukma masnisin b'shchiv mira, because our Mishnah isn't talking about a shchiv mira. Rav Zvid says I don't hold like Rav Papa because our Mishnah simply is not talking about a shchiv mira. Mimai, how do we know that our Mishnah is not talking about a shchiv mira? Midiktani, well, from the fact that it says in our Mishnah, ha'omer tnu get ze leishti ushtashichu ze le'avdi vames lo yitnu le'achar misa. Our Mishnah says that if a fellow says tnu get ze leishti, give this get to my wife, ushtar shichur ze le'avdi, or give this shtar shichur to my eved vames, and he dies, lo yitnu le'achar misa, they don't give these documents after he's dead. Taima, demes. The reason why we don't give these documents is because the fellow died. Hamechayim nosnin. But if he was still alive, then you would give the document. Taima do amar tnu. The reason why you give it is because he says specifically the lashon of tnu. Halo amar tnu, but if he wouldn't have said tnu, if he would have said, for example, kisvu, right? If he wouldn't have said give it, but he would have said write it, ein nosnin, you would not give it, right? So Rav Zvid is saying that our Mishnah can't be talking about a shchiv mira, because if you are medayik in our Mishnah, the Mishnah seems to be implying that if he were, right, because he dies, so you don't give it. But if he were alive, then you would give the document. And specifically because he says tnu, but if he would say kisvu, write it, but not give it, then we would not give the get to his wife. But ushchiv mira afagab lo amar tnu nosnin. But the halacha is, says Rav Zvid, that by a shchiv mira, even if he doesn't say tnu, even if he doesn't say give, if he only says write the get, still you would write it and give it. But our Mishnah seems to be implying that only because he says give it, but if he would say write it, we wouldn't write it and give it. And therefore Rav Zvid says that our Mishnah cannot be talking about a shchiv mira, because by a shchiv mira, even if all he said was write it, you would still write it and give it. Ditnan, as we learn in a Mishnah. But Rishono ayu omrim, initially they would say, hayotze bakoler, if somebody was being taken out to be executed, ve'omer, and he says, kisvu get leishti, write a get to my wife, hari'elu yichtavu v'yitnu. They not only write it, but also give it, because we assume that was his intention, not just to write it, but also to give it. But because, as you can imagine, he was a little bit not thinking so clearly. He had other things on his mind, or he was unsettled, so he didn't say give it, but really his intention was to give it. Chazuv lomar, and then they said, afam mafarish vayotze b'shayara, even somebody who goes out on a long boat journey, or on a long wagon journey someplace, a caravan. Reb Shimon Shazuri Omer Afa Mesukon, and Reb Shimon Shazuri says even a shchiv mira, that if a shchiv mira says kisvu, it means kisvu usnu. And our Mishnah says that only because he says tnu, but if you would say kisvu, then you would not give the get. So therefore, we see that Shimon Shazuri's opinion is that by a shchiv mira who says kisvu, it means kisvu usnu. So our Mishnah must not be talking about a shchiv mira. Maskif Rav Ashi, but Rav Ashi asked the kasha and Rav Zvid. He says, "Uman neimalon demasnis Rav Shimon Shazuri dilma rabonani." But Rav Ashi asked the kasha and Rav Zvid. He says, "Yeah, but who says that our Mishnah is the opinion of Rav Shimon Shazuri? Maybe our Mishnah is the opinion of the Chachamim, who say that by a shchiv mira he would have to say tnu. Kisvu would not work." So Rav Zvid wants to say that our Mishnah can't be talking about a shchiv mira. But Rav Ashi says maybe our Mishnah is talking about a shchiv mira, and it's the opinion of the rabbis who say that by a shchiv mira would have to say tnu, kisvu would not work. Gufa, we had said earlier, Amr Fun Amrav, Mona li biyadcha tanelo lefloni b'maimud shloshton kona. Okay, we had discussed this case earlier, that if Shimon says to Ruvain, "Hey Ruvain, I've got some money by you, can you give it to Levi?" and all three parties are there, then it's a kinyan, and Ruvain has to give it to Levi. Amar Rav mistaber milsa d'Rabbi pikodin, aval b'milveh lo. So Rav says, look, I understand this when it comes to a deposit, that if, like we said, Svurin u'munochin b'keren zavis, right, that if Shimon says to Reuven, hey Reuven, I left some money at your house, I assume it's still there in the corner somewhere, I want you to give it to Levi. But if it's a loan, if Shimon lent money to Reuven, and that money isn't in a corner in his house someplace, but he had spent it, and, eventually he'll pay it, he'll work and earn enough money to pay it back, but it's not like sitting in a corner in some place right now. So then that Rav is not talking about that. He's not talking about a loan. Ve'elokim amar Rav afilu b'milveh. So now the Gemara says, Ma pitom. Rav says, even by a loan. If Shimon says to Reuven, I lent you $1,000. I want you to pay it back to Levi. It manami u'zoichet stated, amar Shmuel b'shmei de Levi, milveh li biyodcha taneu lo lefloni. If Shimon says to Reuven, I lent you, right, milveh li biyodcha, I lent you $1,000. I want you to pay it back to Levi. B'maimet shloshtan, and all three parties are there, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Kona. So Levi is koneh, and Reuven pays the loan back to Levi. V'taima mai, how come? Omer HaMeimer says, HaMeimer naise ke omer lo b'shas ma'in ma'os. It's ki'ilu Reuven said to Shimon at the time that Reuven, received the $1,000 from Shimon, the loan. Shibadna le loch lelidach u'lechol da'asu machmosach. Reuven, when receiving the $1,000 from Shimon, he says, thank you very much, and I'm being mishabed myself, I'm being mishabed myself to you, and anybody who might come via you. Right? At the time that Reuven accepts the money from Shimon, he says, look, and I'm being mishabed myself to you. I'm making myself mishubad, like I have to do what you tell me, and that's not the right way to say it, but like subservient, but I don't think that's really the right word. Again, my brain's a little fuzzy still. But I'm being mishabed myself to you, and anybody who comes via you, i.e., if it ends up being Levi, okay, so I'll pay back Levi. Omele Rav Ashi la Meimer, but Rav Ashi says to Meimer, if it's like you're saying that it's at the time that Reuven receives the money, he's saying that I'm being mishabed myself to you and anybody who comes via you. Elameato hakne linolodim to lahav b'shasma and mos hachinami dilo kanu. Well, it would sound based on that if Shimon says, you know what, I want you to give the money to so-and-so who wasn't yet born at the time that I gave you the money for the loan. It would sound like that should not work, right? Because if we're saying that at the time that Reuven receives the money, he's being mishabed himself to anybody who might come via Shimon. Well, at the time that we would need that at the time that Reuven receives the money, the person who he's going to be giving it to is alive at the time. Implying that if Shimon would say, I want you to give the money to this person who wasn't alive at the time that I lent you the money, then Reuven would not have to give the money to that person because he was mishabed himself to the time that he received the money. At that time, he says, anybody who comes via you, I'll pay them. But if this person wasn't born yet, then he wasn't mishabed himself to that. That even Rav Meir who says that a person can be makne adavar shlo bal olam, for example, figs that haven't been grown yet, right? So animil adavar sheyeshna ba'olam, but that's only to a person who's already alive. Aval davar she'no bal olam lo, but a person who is not yet alive, so then you can't make a shibud for that. So Rav Ashi says to Meimar, you seem to be implying that Shimon would be unable to say to Reuven, I want you to give it to this person who wasn't born yet. Elo, Rav Ashi, rather says Rav Ashi, Bai hanoyo dekomishtanya le bein milva yishana le milva chadasha gomer mishabed nafshi. Rather, Rav Ashi has a different take on it. It's not that Ruvain is being mishabed himself at the time that he receives the money, but rather at the time that Shimon says to Ruvain, hey Ruvain, I want you to pay Levi instead of me, Ruvain says, okay, that's cool with me. Because now that the creditor changes, the creditor might kind of give him some extra time, right? To realize that it's a new, right? If he had to pay back Shimon by a certain time, but now that things changed and there's new, management of the debt, of the loan, so maybe the new management will be willing to kind of give some extra leeway over there, and Reuven is cool with that because he figures, okay, maybe, there's some extra room with the new sort of third, with the Levi, who will give me some extra time to pay it back, and Reuven doesn't mind that. So Amarle, Huna my breder of Nechemia the Rav Ashi, but Huna my breder of Nechemia says to Rav Ashi, Elameato kigon hani teve bar el Yoshev de kafte v'shakli la'alter hachinami de lokanu. But if that's the case, what about the people from Beit Bar Yoshev, that they're not such nice guys, that when they take over a loan, they want it paid yesterday? And therefore, if that's the case, if Shimon says to Reuven, I want you to pay back the money to these people from Beit Bar Yoshev, Reuven says, oh no, those guys are scary people. I'm not down with that. So if that's the case, then maybe that would not be a good kinyan, and the money would not go to these people of Baal Yoshev. And if you're going to say, in that case, the money would not go to those scary people. But if that's the case, then what you're saying becomes subjective. It depends who the third party is. If the third party is these scary people from Beit Bar Yoshev, then the money doesn't go to them, because Reuven wasn't makneh to them, wasn't on board. But if it's some other people who might have give him some extra leeway, he'd be down. But then, now we don't have sort of objective rules over here. It depends who you are. Rather, says Marzutre, rather the following three examples are dinim d'Rabbanan that the rabbis basically make as if they're halach l'Moshe miSinai. As if they're halach l'Moshe miSinai. That there's no specific reason for them. Chadaha, one of them is this: the fact that Shimon can say to Reuven, pay the money to Levi, and it's in front of all three parties, and it's a good kinyan. There isn't necessarily a good reason for it. It's not because at the time of the loan, Reuven was mishabed himself, and it's not because Reuven is okay with getting extra time. It's none of those. There doesn't seem to be a good reason for it. This is the halacha. That if Shimon says to Reuven, pay back the loan to Levi, and all three parties are there, it's a good kinyan, and he has to pay it back to Levi, even if Levi is scary. Ve'idach, the second halacha that doesn't necessarily make sense, there's no logical reason for it per se. The Amr of Yudah Amar Shmuel hakosev kol lechosav liishto lo asoy la apotropia, that if a husband writes all of his property to his wife, it doesn't actually go to her, she just becomes like a custodian. Meaning, if he writes it all to his wife, so then his kids aren't going to inherit any of his property. If all of his property goes to his wife, is his wife's, and he dies, so nothing goes to his kids, it all goes to his wife. And we assume that he doesn't want to disinherit his kids, and therefore we treat it as though she's just kind of a custodian of it, and then when the kids become of age, they would then be able to inherit. At that point they would get the property, and it wouldn't be hers. Ve'idach, the third thing that doesn't necessarily have logical reasoning is the Amr of Chananya, Hamasi Isha Livno Gadol Babayis, that if a fellow builds a house for his eldest son to get married in, Kana'o, the eldest son acquires the house and it belongs to the eldest son. Amrele Rav, the Rav Acha Bardila, Rav says to Rav Acha Bardila, Kova de Morika Isli Gabach. Rav says to Rav Acha Bardila in the presence of a third party that I have a kav of saffron at your house. Yaive lefloni, give it to this third person. And he says to Rav Acha Bardila, and I'm telling you to give it to him in his presence, right? All three of us are here. And because all three of us are here, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm saying it in front of all three of us so that I won't change my mind. Implying that the only reason why he's not going to change his mind is because of the social pressure, that I'm saying it to you in front of all three of us, so now I'm not going to change my mind because of the social pressure. Implying, though, that there's no halachic reason why he can't change his mind. But wouldn't that be a situation of what we've been discussing? That Shimon says to Reuven, give something to Levi, and all three parties are there, so then it's a proper kinyan, and they would have to go to Levi. Forget about social pressure. It's halachic reality. So, Achi Ka'amar, this is what Rav is saying. Dvar malalu lo nitnu lachazara. This stipulation cannot be reverted because it's in front of all three of us. But Amar Rav chadazimna. But Rav had already said that earlier on today's daf. Dam Rav Huna Rav monoli biyadach biyadcha. I have money by you. Shimon says, I have to Reuven, I have money by you. Tanei lo lefloni, give it to Levi. B'maimat shloshtan kana. And if this is said in front of all three of them, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, it's a proper kinyan. Well, that I may have thought is specifically an expensive gift, such as a mana. Expensive, right? A lot of money. But a small gift, right? A small thing, like a kav of saffron, lowly by b'fanav, then we would not need it to be in front of all three of them. So kamash malon. So we're saying that this halacha applies both by big things and by small things. It's interesting because saffron these days, I think they say, is more expensive than gold. But anyway, so we see that the same halacha applies whether it is whether it's something expensive, whether it's something non-expensive. There were these gardeners, three gardeners, or a few gardeners, and they were, dividing up expenses. And it turned out that one of the gardeners had had a few extra coins. So they said to this gardener, give the extras to the landlord. And the landlord was there. So basically, they're saying to the gardener, this extra money of ours that you currently have, give it to somebody else. And it was in front, and all the parties were there. And not only were all the parties there, they actually made an actual kinyan, so that the money would actually have to go to the landlord. They made a kinyan on it. This gardener with the extra money then went home and he did the math, he did the accounting. Lo pashkabi v'lo midi, and it turns out that it's not true. He doesn't have anything extra, and he shouldn't have to give anything to the landlord. Also, he comes to Rav Nachman, Omalei, and Rav Nachman says, look, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? First of all, there's the statement, right? There's the halacha of Rav Huna Amarav, that when when all three parties are there, so it makes a kinyan. And secondly, hakanu minach. You actually, in addition to just saying it in front of all of the parties, you made an actual kinyan to give this, right? That this money belongs to the landlord. Amli Rava says to Rav Nachman, 1 second. This gardener isn't saying that I don't want to pay it. He's saying that I shouldn't have to pay it because it was all based on the fact that I had extra money, but it's not true. They made an accounting error. Amarle, so Rav Nachman responds, if that's the case, kinyan b'tosu, then the whole kinyan was a mistake. A mistaken kinyan reverts, and therefore you don't have to give the landlord anything. Friends, that was the Daf Yud Gimel of Masechta Gittin. We learned an interesting daf about if a fellow says give a get isha, get shichrur, and then he dies, or if he says give money and then he dies, so by get isha and get shichrur you wouldn't have to give it, by money you would have to give it. We want to understand, is the Mishnah talking about a bari, a shriv mira? Rav Zvid says that it's talking about a bari, and it's this concept of If Shimon says to Reuven, give money to Levi, and all three parties are there, well then it Mimela makes a kinyan. Rav Papa says it's talking about that it's talking about a shribmira, but his opinion is that a shribmira who says to give money has to specify exactly which money that he gives. And different halachos like that. Friends, that was the Yud Gimel of Masechet Gittin. I hope you enjoy. Peace out.